Hey, deserving listeners, the curious case of Natalia Grace. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor and a YouTuber. Let's watch.
One of the neighbors called CPS. So CPS shows up in the door, Child Protective Services, with a detective from the local police department.
Okay, so one of the neighbors calls Child Protective Services, says, I see a child sleeping. Probably the neighbor knows, because they've interviewed other neighbors and they probably know what's going on. So who knows what the report exactly was. CPS worker shows up with a police officer, and let's see what happens.
They come in, they've got this call, and we're neglecting Natalia.
The detective for the Westfield Police Department.
Now, it's possible that the police, the law enforcement officer, and the CPS worker globally understand, or at least had a more nuanced point of view on the big picture. And they weren't out to get the parents or something. But on the surface, if you just look at the behavior, it is child neglect. That's what you would call it. To force a child to sleep outside is neglectful. You're not physically punching a child. You are denying them a fundamental right or a fundamental aspect of safety that you can provide. And there's also no justification, really. She's not telling me the truth. So that's the label. So it's possible that they saw, well, we understand the bigger picture, but we have to ding you for this and get the ball rolling. Now, I would be called sometimes by the government after these kinds of determinations were made. They would determine that the abuse wasn't severe enough to just take the child away completely. And they would say, maybe it would be best for the family and the kid if we send a therapist into the home and actually help them to change, figure out what's going on. And so I would enter the homes in these situations and would be tasked with figuring out what's going on and helping. So I wonder if that might happen here. A therapist, helping.
He's here to protect my sons. He knows instantly they're in grave danger.
Detective Klaus.
He conducts an investigation. He comes back and visits us. He's got a picture of Natalia from when she was naturalized here as a U.S. citizen in 2008, when she first got here from the Ukraine. He's got her naturalization information.
Okay, interesting. So the police officer takes sympathy on the family and starts investigating and finds documentation. I'm going to take notes on this.
Basic vital statistics, stuff like that.
Natalia admitted to Detective Klaus that she was told her new birthday at the orphanage in Ukraine. That new birthday being 2003.
She was told her birthday would be September 4, 2003, and she was 4 years old. So it's hard to know the motivation on that. I'm guessing they're going to tell us more. But my initial assumption, given my experience, would be that the adoption agency had no way of determining the age precisely, but had enough reason to believe that she was in the ballpark of 4, and they just said, let's just pick a date because everyone needs a birthday, and there needs to be some indication of when you cross thresholds like turning 16 where you can get a driver's license, and you can't just say, well, in the driver's license on your documentation can't be like, well, somewhere around 2003. There needs to be a date. I don't know the legality of that, but I'm pretty sure that's why that is.
Detective Klaus showed her a picture of herself from when she entered the country, but she did not recognize herself in the picture.
He's not 100% convinced the girl in the picture is even her. Another interesting thing he mentions to us is her height. 4 years ago, when she was naturalized, she hasn't grown a centimeter.
Wait, is that the twist? That she's not even that kid? Because, as one of the things that they've been saying is that she allegedly cannot speak or understand Ukrainian, but we just saw documentation that at the age of 4 or at some age, she came to the States. And at this point in the story that they're telling us, it's only 4 years after she supposedly immigrated. So now we're hearing that maybe Natalia isn't even Natalia, that somehow, my God, did she kill the kid and assume, though, that can't possibly be true.
He informs us he believes that her Ukrainian birth certificate is all bogus. Here's this business card to an attorney.
Oh, so what the police officer was hypothesizing is that it's not that the kid was replaced, it's just a complete made-up set of documentation with maybe a picture of some random kid off the internet or something.
You need to go to them immediately. You need to correct her age. You can't just take an eraser to her birth certificate. I'd never heard of such a thing. It never even crossed my mind. I just thought we have an adult who's masquerading as an 8-year-old, and that's what it is.
Right. It's not usually this inaccurate. Now, I will say that I would have clients that, and some clients would admit to me that they actually did know their birthday, and the family did know precisely when the child was born, but they knew that it would be harder for the child if they identified the child's real age, because they would enter a grade or an age group that the immigrant child wouldn't be ready for. You know, like you have a 15-year-old kid who immigrated to the States, and it's predicted by the family, maybe accurately so, that if they just are slotted into the rest of the 15-year-olds with the classes and the activities and the temptations and the influences, that this 15-year-old kid would not thrive as well as if they were allowed to catch up, not only academically, but culturally. And so they might lie and say the kid's 12, and that's what the official record says. And so the kid enters that stream of development. And, you know, I've heard that before too. And, you know, you could imagine that being a concern. But how do they know? I mean, if there are questions as to whether or not they even know who this individual is, how do you determine the age, right? I guess you just have to take a guess.
So the only way to protect the entire family, I have to prove she's an adult and that
She definitely has a fake Ukrainian birth certificate. Christine and I, again, we reached out to the adoption agency when we asked them, can you help give us contact information?
Now, we've been hearing primarily from Michael, the dad. We haven't heard from the mom at all. We've heard a little bit from one of the boys in the family and some of the staff members at the mental health hospital, but the bulk of the narrative is from the father on this documentary. And if, say, Natalia is actually Natalia and maybe lied on the form regarding age, but is Natalia, if you're a family that's really struggling with this adoption, it's a convenient narrative to say that she's an adult and she's not who she says she is, so we have no responsibility. We can literally just kick her out of the house. She's a criminal. She's an adult. Legally, no one needs to take care of her. She should fend for herself. So that is a convenient narrative and would be very convenient if it crops up during a CPS investigation, you know. Now, who knows? Maybe it's all somewhat true, but I just throw that out there.
Information for her old family. We have got to find out what's going on here. They said, no, we can't.
the answer is always, it is a closed adoption. The other family does not want to surrender any information to you. It is not until...
I'm going to take a guess and say that, yeah, if it's a closed adoption and there are laws and rights that say that the biological family or whoever had Natalia before, it sounds like maybe there's another adoptive family before, then yeah, sure. But when you have enough evidence to believe that Natalia isn't who she says she is or isn't the age, then you just imagine that there would be some kind of exception to the rule.
Really inspect those backpacks. So go upstairs in the house, get the backpacks out, start rummaging through it.
There was a little ID tag inside of her bag when we adopted her that had the original family's information on it.
That is weird. I mean, this is potentially a year or two later, and there's this free-floating ID tag that presumably Natalia wouldn't want them to find, or maybe she would want them to find. It's pretty interesting.
We know, according to records, Natalia starts her early life in an orphanage in Ukraine.
Okay, again, we don't know if this is the same person that's living with them, but if that's true, then that explains some things in that at orphanages, unless they pay very close attention to consistent caregiving by a small set, if not one individual, one staff member, then you have massive attachment disruption. You might be able to provide for the physical needs of the child, food and sleep and shelter and safety and cleanliness, maybe even activities, creative activities, fun activities. But if the child is denied that strong attachment figure that is consistent at least a number of hours every day, then we know neurologically there will be effects and behaviorally there will be effects.
Да, мы с нам уже говорили. Мы хотели просто уточнить вопрос касательно ее дочери Натальи.
Наташа?
Да.
Наташа в Америке живет?
Да. Думаешь, там разобраться именно по-настоящему, что произошло.
Ну, что произошло? Оставила она ей когда-то свое время, а потом одни приняли выбор.
Okay, so according to the biological mother's sister, Natalia, what'd she say?
Наташа в Америке живет?
Да. Думаешь, там разобраться именно по-настоящему, что произошло.
Ну, что произошло? Оставила.
So she's saying what happened is that the mother, biological mother, abandoned her once,
Она ей когда-то свое время.
and then one family took her, then threw her away. So, yeah.
А потом одни приняли, выбросили.
Another took her, presumably this is in Ukraine, another took her and threw her away like trash. So, yeah, just heartbreaking. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's a new year, so of course it's time for New Year's resolutions. But often, those are just manifestations of internalized harmful voices, voices that tell us we're not good enough. So instead of making a resolution to change something, let's recognize that we are already good enough. Now, most people think of therapy as a place for us to work on our problems, but there are several schools of thought within the field of psychotherapy that adamantly reject that paradigm, like narrative therapy and solution-focused. Instead, these clinicians help us focus on what we're already doing well. And by helping us do that, data shows that we often will gravitate towards more beneficial patterns. Well, one place you can find such therapists is on BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, it's definitely worth giving a try. So, celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
Алло, Ань, слышишь, тут приехали молодые люди насчет твоей Наташи. Они хотят там что-то с тобой пообщаться. Сейчас я им дам трубочку, пообщайся.
Аня,
Какие молодые люди? Что
вы
они хотят от меня?
успокойтесь. Аня, нам надо
На нее
просто...
посмотрите, я такая же, как и она. Мы с ней близнецы.
Okay, so identical twins. The mother has an identical twin, all right?
Аня, мы приедем, это долго...
И они хотят...
Ой, они меня оставят в покое. Оставят, блядь, когда...
Ну, поговори с ними.
Я не хочу, скажи, ни с кем рассказывать. 17 лет доходит до хуйня, блядь.
17 years. They are all going here and there to be 17 years. Okay. Hard to know if this is accurate, but looks like it's strong evidence that Natalia is 17, which is a far cry from 6, or by the time they're in this part of the narrative, I think Natalia would be 8.
This woman, Anna Gava, who is supposedly Natalia's biological mother, just said she's been going through this saga for 17 years. Well, she said that in 2020. Do the math.
Oh, in 2020. So, wait, what? So how come we're all the way out in 2020? That, maybe I missed that bit. So, okay, if we do the math, that's 17 years. That's 2007. That doesn't make any sense. Or, sorry, 2003. Right, 2003. My math. But we thought she was born in 2004. So, because anyway, I'm lost.
That means Natalia may really have been born in 2003, which is what she has said all along.
Oh, okay. So, I think that's the lawyer. Okay, so I thought she was saying, do the math, she's way older. Okay, so according to the mom, well, I don't know. It's just hard to say. Unless you have some kind of hard evidence, then who knows? But it is absolutely possible. And like I was saying earlier, given the stress of parenting a child with behavior problems, perhaps as a result of the revolving door of attachment figures that Natalia had growing up, the parents are grasping for any excuse that they don't have to deal with it anymore. And the notion that she's a lot older than she actually is, an actual adult, would give them an out. So maybe that's what's been happening.
It's possible that they found her behavior to be too hard to manage. I don't know, but the Sacones, it's clear they wanted to unload her. Closed adoption, giving virtually no information about her. They made a mistake, though. They left their identifying information on one of the luggage tags. So,
okay, this seems to be suggesting that the first adoptive family might be to blame for this whole thing. And that's possible. It's possible that Natalia had limited behavioral problems, and then through the abandonment of the adoptive family in New Hampshire, her behaviors became 10 times worse. It's possible.
Within 6 months of getting her, they were taking her to little people conventions and trying to give her away under the table. Hey, you're a couple, you don't have a kid, you want one? Here's one right here.
Again, it's Michael telling a story. It's hard to know. He has, I think, motivation to exaggerate or just make stuff up. But we're hearing that the New Hampshire family would just go to a little person convention and just say, take this child. I mean, if that's true, my God. But it sounds fantastical.
We found 2 different families that they tried to give her to. One, they gave her to under the table for 4 months. I mean, extortion demand of $30,000.
Okay, well, that's specific. Again, his account, but let's review those details.
They gave her to under the table for 4 months. I mean, extortion demand.
They gave her to the family for 4 months. Give me an extortion amount of $30,000. Oh, my God. The details in this story. It's hard to believe.
Diane and her husband said, pay the legal fees and you can adopt this little girl. If I remember right, she told me that adoption costs from the Ukraine were around $25,000. And I find it kind of crazy that you would adopt a child and spend $25,000 and only spend a year with that child.
So the New Hampshire family is trying to extort money out of the next family, $25,000. At least the potential allegation is that they're lying about that and just trying to get a bunch of money. So the allegation is that there's this family in New Hampshire that either when times get tough, they just try to use the adopted kid to gain money, or they adopted the child in bad faith to begin with to extort other people for money.
So I find it odd. I don't know if there was a financial scam or not. My husband decided, I don't think we can do this financially. And I feel like if you're going to adopt, both parents have to be totally into it. But it broke my heart.
Yeah, and just add another tick in the column of a major trauma for this young child. Even if the kid is older than what the records say, which it appears maybe not to be the case, that's just really hard on somebody. Think about for yourself, and this is much easier to cope with, is you start dating and you fall in like with somebody and they dump you, and then you go out with someone else and you get the nerve up and you date 15 other people, and it's hard, and you get your hopes up, and then you finally find a person to lock in with, and then that person, after 2 years, they cheat on you, and then you date again. I'm guessing some of you are like, oh my God, you're describing my Tinder life. And then the next person just ghosts you, and the next, maybe there's a few in there where you break up with them as well, but you can imagine after a while just giving up. It's not unheard of, right? To say, at least for a time, I am not open. Even if someone comes to me out of the blue and seems perfect for me, why would I open myself up to that? And I might even be adamantly against entertaining such thoughts because it's so painful. It's going to result in me opening up, and then I'll be in pain. So what's the point? That's a lot easier to deal with, even though that's hard, than being 0 to 5 years old and experiencing this kind of getting your hopes up that, oh my God, finally someone is here for me, and now they're no longer here for me. So at least we're hearing an account, I think, of the mama abandoning the child, then another family in Ukraine abandoning a child, then another family in Ukraine abandoning the child. Then she goes into an orphanage in Ukraine, which is going to do a number on you in all likelihood because you have a rotating staff of people. Then you get shipped away across the world to be adopted into this family in New Hampshire. You probably don't speak English at all, right? And like, who are these people? And it sounds like they're not great people, who knows? And then you're with another family, this family in Indiana, and then you're back with the family in New Hampshire. You know, it's rough. And there's so many kids right now that are dealing with this. Some of you might know stories. Some of you might have actually dealt with a situation like this. There are so many people, particularly when you start thinking around the globe, there are so many children who are experiencing this revolving door. And that's even in situations where a lot of people, adults, are well-meaning, let alone in a situation where it seems like Natalia might be being exploited for money. It's, you know, so this is a very common story that I've heard a lot, and it's heartbreaking. And the effects last a lifetime. You know, the Natalias of the world have a lifetime of healing ahead of them. All right, well, let's wrap it up there. Tune in next time when I continue watching. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.